All right, here's some eye candy for you. This is the coil section of a National NC57B. It's the latest model. It's not the one with the porcelain sockets or the copper disc for reduction. Veneer. It's a veneer reduction drive. It's the model that's after the NC57. This is the NC57B. And this is some eye candy. And up here, this is the fine tuning for the antenna. These are your antenna coils. This is where the signal comes in. You select one of these when you throw the band switch. And then this is a cross one, and this is the fine tuning. So when you're listening to a station, you can tune this capacitor. Let's see if we can see it moving. All right, we move this capacitor, and you can peak up the station. Now, this section here, this is the mixer. It's got another coil. It's also tuned. You can align this coil. There's slugs in these coils. All right, now the next one over here, these are another bank of oscillator coils. Each band has a coil. Now you say, well, why are you showing me this? Well, I want to show you what an NC57 looks like. This is an NC57B. It's a later model. Now we'll go over to, because I have the ability to show you this, so I'm going to show you this. All right, here's an NC57. And right away you notice things are missing. Like, where the hell are all the coils? Well, laying down in the bottom is a horizontal coil. It's this way. All right, it's not up and down. And then along the bottom edge, you have coils that are standing. Am I up in the frame? Hold on, let me shift the camera. All right, they're peeking down in here are coils that are up and down. So right away you notice there's less capacitors to make adjustments. There's also these coils, the ones that are laying up and down, or right to along horizontally, they don't have a slug in them, and you can't adjust the bottom end. See, every time you adjust or do an alignment, on your oscillator, you adjust the bottom end of the dial, you adjust your coil. Then you go to the top of the dial and you do a capacitor. And you go back and forth, and then the dial should fall in, they say 1.5%. Well, on the NC57s, it's not going to happen. They do give you a capacitor for each coil. And there's some up in here. But in other words, if you really want really good calibration, don't go with the NC57. And I have a hard time when looking at the eBay pictures, figuring out, is it a B or is it just a plain NC57? And you got to look for that you got to learn to look for that copper disc up in the tuning section. And also there are Bs without that, but that's what I use. I just ordered another one. This is my favorite radio. Now, I went off on a quick romance with the BC348. Great radio, but it's not that sensitive on the AM broadcast band, and it doesn't do the full AM broadcast band. See, what I like to do, like at night, I like to tune on the AM broadcast band and pick up other states. And I've been doing that forever, since I was younger, and that was my thing. I never really listened to a local station. And I told you, my father, when we were in the car, we'd be driving along, listening to WKBW from Buffalo in New Jersey. And certain hills you'd go up, you get it really good, and then you go down. But my father he just didn't want to listen to local news. He wanted to listen to New York State news and Pennsylvania news. But that's what got me into it, that you could pick up stations from another state with a radio, if the radio was good enough. Now, these NC57s, once you recap it and change resistors, remember I just did a video on that. If you have bad capacitors and then you continue to use the radio, the capacitors become leaky to ground, and then the resistor that goes to the pin of the tube where that capacitor is starts to supply more current through the capacitor to ground. that it normally wouldn't, and then that resistor heats up and it goes up in value. So after you change the capacitor, you won't get really good sensitivity on the radio, because then you got to go back and change the resistor. But I'm trying to show you everything. I got two messages this morning. People want me to help them fix their radios. See, part of the hobby is learning how to fix and keep reading. Now, one guy he has a motorboating problem. Now, that can be anything from your power supply, or a capacitor that he didn't recap, or I did power supply, we didn't recap. Also, the weirdest motorboating I ever had was I had an IF cam in an NC57, and it was all marked underneath on the chassis. And the guy had all kinds of problems. You know, he had like notes down on there, and I'm like, all right, let me just take the IF cam out of the radio. And I looked it over, and it's got a capacitor in there. It doesn't have doesn't get the silver mica problem, but it has capacitors in there, and they're the kind that look like dominoes. And I unsoldered one side, and I put my ohm meter across it on a high scale, and it was shorted. So that's what was wrong with the IF cam. So now I put a new capacitor in, and I put the IF cam back in the radio. I tuned it up, and I'm noticing I'm getting like oscillation and motorboating. And then I'm like, what the hell? And I'm pushing down on the can, and it's stopping. So I went reading, and I found a guy who said, yeah, he goes, aluminum can sitting on a steel chassis, it's making contact for resistive. In other words, you put on R×1 your meter, and you put your meter on the can and the chassis, and you get continuity, but RF-wise, it's not making contact. So what I had to do was I lifted the can up off the chassis, and I took an eraser, and I erased that whole area with an eraser instead of sandpaper. Did the bottom of the can, and fixed it. That was it. But what he had done was he ran some wire around, bare wire around the can, and then soldered that to a ground. But I'm looking at, that IF cans don't really get that problem, but he had the weird problem. He fixed it his way. I fixed it to fix it. Well, I was like, okay, I know I don't have contact between the can RF-wise and the chassis, and when I push down on the can, the oscillation stops. And that's the things that it takes years of experience, and then you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. A lot of things is you got to know what you're doing. And the first thing I do when I get in trouble is I go looking for someone that had the same problem, or I go looking for someone that had a similar problem, because every radio, I mean, look at all the parts in these things. Come on, you get a capacitor that's I've had these things go bad. These tunable, actually these. Let me show you these. In the frame, these will be so mildewed up or gummed up from being in the cellar that they won't turn. And one of the radios I just did, I didn't mention that was one of the many things that went bad. When I went to calibrate the radio, these wouldn't move. These will still work. These are pretty good, but that's what you got to expect. And then finding out what the part is, working back and forth between the schematic and the pictorial and the parts list. Now, if you've never done that before, good luck. I've done it for years. See, I'm new. I'm not new to this game. I've been repairing radios since I was 8 years old. I told you I used to pull them out of the garbage, and then my dad had a TV repair shop with my uncle, and in the cellar he had a rack, and had all the Sam's folders for older radios. And he'd go find the folder for me of a radio that was very similar. And he says, I don't have that Sam's. In other words, there's folders you buy. And he says, but this one's a similar model. And I would work with a similar schematic, and I'd get the radio working. And I told you, I'd take a few parts off the radio, and then I'd throw the rest out and start again, pull another one out of it. I never pulled the shortwave radio out of the garbage. I've seen them in the garbage, but they were real big consoles, and I had no way to get them home. And when I was in high school, if I saw something really good in the garbage, I would take it out of the garbage. I'd go into the office and have the woman put it off to the side for me. And she started complaining, because a lot of stuff you pull out of the garbage, there's a mildew smell to it. Oh, you got another old radio. Blah, blah, blah. But I just stand my ground, and she put it there. And then after school, I'd go down and get the radio and carry it home. And most of the time, I told you, with old radios, it's a little kid puts a fork through the speaker. The on-off switch and volume control is worn out. The filter capacitor is usually bad. You get hum. And then what's really bad is a lot of people, when they put radios out in the garbage, they would pull all the tubes out. So I'd really look at this set and I say, that's just a, I didn't know they were called All-American 5s, AA5s back in those days. I just go, that's just a simple kitchen radio. And I let it stay in the garbage. And but you did, if you really went out in the better neighborhoods, you found better radios. And I was always going through my neighborhood. In my neighborhood, the people would always take the tubes out, thinking they were going to do something with the tubes later on. And then as the years went by, I remember who those people were. And they'd say to me, I have a box of tubes in the cellar. Do you want it? I go, no. Well, they must be worth something. I said, look, no, they're not. Well, I don't care. I said, nobody really wants a tube radio unless they're a collector. And the collectors can get the tubes cheap enough. Tubes are not the problem. The problem with older radios is replacing that speaker. They had some really good speakers in these radios. They were just the right frequency range that was, you could handle music and you could handle the news. It sounded good. It had a little bit of bass to it. It resonated in the cabinet. And then you go buy a replacement speaker and it's hard. It's absolutely hard when you put it in one of these radios. But anyway, yeah, it's so funny. All the people, oh, I have a box of tubes in the cellar. You know, would you like to buy them? I'm like, get out of here. I don't want those old tubes. I'm in transistors. And actually, a lot of times I was already in solid state as far as integrated circuits. And their eyes would just glaze over. See, they actually thought there were still tubes in some of the radios. Yeah, I told you that one neighbor, well, it's probably just a tube. I said, the only tube in her television set is the picture tube. And then she rolled her eyes like I was an idiot. Yeah, who's the idiot? I was actually an idiot for talking to her. But it is what it is. But just want to tell you, you know, I really don't appreciate people asking me questions like how to fix stuff. Because I told you got to bring something to the table. And if you watch one of my videos, I'm showing you stuff for the guy that's right behind me in knowledge. You know, like I don't know. I look on eBay and I want to know the B from the non-B. There is no A. And then I have a hard time. You know, I have to look at the pictures. How many extra holes have been drilled into the radio? You know, it took how many radios of each type that I had to buy before I caught on to the crap that's going on eBay. You know, person changing the knobs. That's one of the first things you got to do. Is you got to look at a radio and realize it doesn't have its original knobs. And that means that radio's got a lot of hours on it, or an idiot, or it's a parts radio that's been doctored up and bodged to sell on eBay. So I really go over and over and over something. Now I just bought one for $85, one of these, in better shape than one of the $400 ones. And that's because people look at what these go for, and then they put it up for that. Meanwhile, it's got all kinds of holes drilled in the back, and you see these phono plug jacks back there. That's for either a Selecto-Jet or a Q multiplier. And these radios were used by a little bit more than novices. This is a better radio than a Hellcrafters S40. This has a better front end. There's the coils, eye candy. Those are the coils. Those are the banks. There's 3 banks: RF amp, a mixer, and oscillator. That's what the three sets of coils are. And the really nice, quiet radios have the 3 banks. Now, when you buy a Hellcrafters, oh, I forget the name of it, the number of it. It's what a piece of junk. And right now there's a guy restoring one of those pieces of junk. If the tuning capacitor, I told you this once before, if the tuning capacitor doesn't have 3 sections on it and a 3-section band spread, don't buy the radio. It's not going to perform good on AM broadcasts. You want it to work good on AM broadcasts. You might get into AM DXing. You want it to work good on shortwave. That's all there is to it, you know. Having a nice AM radio, there is some interesting things on AM. And even out here there is, because a lot of these big companies now are ditching some of the AM stations. because there's not as many people listening. So the ones that are on there are trying to be more inventive. They have better playlists now, like Sweet 16 out here in Lancaster. You might be able to listen to it online. They use some type of oldies playlist that they get, I guess, off the internet. So they play songs that no other radio station plays, doesn't even have it. And I put that station on. And that's one of the criterions for these radios, is they have to get the Sweet 16. And the Collins just barely picks it up. And the Collins, if you look at the schematic, you can tell right away it's got a bad AM broadcast station section. It's got 3 mixers in operation to get it, and it still doesn't do as good as this radio. Then the BC348, it only does the top of the AM broadcast band. And that's because they were using the top of the AM broadcast band. Was it 180 meters, 160? Anyway, the hams used to use that frequency range. Now a lot of it is extended AM broadcast. But this is my favorite radio. Which one is it? It's a different one. I've gotten these coils where they're rotted out and the wires broke, and I take this whole apart. And this is a full day job, just taking a little part at a time, getting the coil out, ohming it out, realizing what winding is rotted out, unwinding the windings, and finding the break in it and rewinding it. I did that on the NC57B, the one with the copper disc and the ceramic sockets. All right, and this one here, these IF cans. This one here, it's the first IF has 3 windings on it. I told you about the 3 windings. This one doesn't. The regular, this one here doesn't have that. For whatever reason, see, I can't even find the information on these radios as why they added this, there's like no real history. And I'm trying to tell you stuff that I read. I find, like, there's a person that says that there's a model of the NC57 that it's a B, and it's got the transformer that's normally on the speaker. It's mounted on the chassis. Now, it's possible that that's true, but I haven't run across one of them. I did find the pictures for an NC57M, and on the back of the chassis, you'll see it warning you about high voltage. That's telling you there's no transformer in the NC57M, and it's a hot chassis radio. It was made to be a cheaper price, and when you look on the inside, the chassis seems to be isolated from part of the chassis. I saw that. I'm like, what am I looking at? And the person selling it is calling it an NC57. And that's the problem. When you're looking at pictures, it's very tough to tell the difference between an NC57 and a B or a late model B. And I'm gotten pretty good only because I own one of each. I think that's it. All right, that's it.